Hey guys, welcome to Cinematographs. I recently got the opportunity to receive an early screener for this independent film, the company called Glitch that nobody and everybody wanted, but I'm just going to refer to it as Glitch for the rest of the video. Glitch is a business drama thriller about a man named Ev who needs to fund his startup that is currently drowning in debt and the decisions he has to make between accepting a buyout or getting an investor. It's told in 3 parts that take place over the course of the same day, and it cross-cuts between all of them, so non-linear structure going on. The film is marketed as being a cross between the essences of Locke, The Social Network, and Memento. I haven't seen Locke or Memento, though I'm familiar with the latter, but I am an avid The Social Network fan, so already I was pretty intrigued. My absolute favorite thing in any type of story is when it introduces multiple storylines that slowly intersect as it goes on until eventually everything comes to a head at the end. It's important to remember that the film's writer/director was 18 at the time of production, and the film is low budget. However, with the things I'll say, I'll still treat the film as if it's just any other, like if I didn't know any of this information. So if I talk about a mistake and you think, but it's difficult to avoid that on such a small budget, well, yeah, but it's still worth discussing. So let's talk about the editing, because that's the most distinct aspect of the film. I really enjoy the structure. By cutting to different plot lines, the film keeps up its energy, so it's easier to pay attention the whole way through. I think without it, the film would lack both style and substance to support the story, because each time frame is basically the same location. But this narrative structure works in a way that's not clunky, tacky, or difficult to understand. There's this one part where Ev has to juggle between like 3 or 4 different calls at once without letting some of them know, so he makes the person he's talking to ramble before switching to the next person. It felt clever and put together, and it heightened the stakes and suspense in the film. However, looking at more of the small details in the editing, there are pretty common lapses, both with sound and video. The sound is less noticeable, but there are some times in the conversation where the dialogue cuts a second too early. I know the conversation scenes were all recorded separately, but I'm wondering if some actors had to speak their lines without hearing the other audio, so maybe the pacing of the 2 different lines didn't match. Along with this, some expressions didn't fully line up with the audio, or those expressions at least felt like acting. In terms of video, I feel like there are some unmotivated cuts where the film will cut to a shot of someone for like a split second. The film doesn't hold on a single shot when I feel like it could, highlighting the performance and making the emotion of the monologue stronger. Maybe this could be because they ended up recording someone talking in 2 separate shots and they needed something to cut away to in order to hide that, but I remember there being multiple moments where the film cut to new angles of someone, so maybe the director felt like they needed a different shot to spice up the otherwise still compositions. But the film is driven by conversation and dialogue, so if there is a mistake in one of those scenes, it is more noticeable. And this goes for the writing as well, which I actually like. It's all really cohesive and there's tons of meaning behind some of the writing. For example, the film introduces something with a crossword puzzle early on, and then that something comes back later in the film in one of the lines. Just small things like that are something I appreciate because it shows care. But one thing is, Ev and a lot of the other characters speaking to him use a lot of analogies in their speech, and that's fine, and it's not that I had any trouble understanding the meaning behind their sentences, but it just got to the point where it felt unnatural. I think there was one conversation between Ev and Sean where they only spoke in this way. It wouldn't have been very noticeable if this type of dialogue wasn't apparent in all of the film. There wasn't enough of a balance between this like clever language and quote-unquote normal language, so it started to come off as intelligent writing for the sake of intelligent writing. And that might be due in part to the acting or line deliveries, but sometimes it just didn't fit with the tone or rhythm of the scene/emotion the character is feeling, and it took me a little bit out of the film. There were parts where it would have flowed better with more straightforward dialogue. So for example, how I mentioned liking the crossword bit, it comes back later for a 3rd time, but in a way that again seems out of place. And probably the biggest weakness of Glitch is in its emotional scenes. So this is in the 2 plot lines of Ev with Crystal and Ev with his dad. And the conversations that end up taking place over the phone with those 2 is meant to be regretful and sad, but it ends up feeling more melodramatic than anything. This has to do with the acting and score. The acting feels a little bit forced and the score feels a little bit overpowering. It doesn't land, and because the feelings of the main character hinge on this subplot, it takes me out of seeing the film as something to look at seriously. But I like the score that's not in these scenes a lot. like the parts where the film aims to build suspense. It reminds me of heists, and I think that's super fitting. My overall rating is a 6.5 out of 10. I actually juggled between this and a 7 for a good bit, but I think a 6.5 is what I would give it without knowing the context of it being a small budget indie. Like if I just stumbled upon it on a streaming site one day. But I could totally see this as being a Hulu or Netflix original, and that's not even like a dig at all because those movies have a much higher budget than this one, and I enjoyed this more than some of those ones. I applaud the film's ability to bring the 3 subplots or storylines or whatever you want to call them all together in the end, but it worked and I could tell there was a specific vision with that. Though I do think more could have been done with the film. And that's a general claim I'm making because I understand that given the circumstances, there's only so much you can do. But yeah, I didn't mind the watch at all. It was paced well and it's just fun. Not a bad feature.